Welcome back. My next guest is Al Acunto, a U.S. Army veteran. Welcome, Al.
Hi, how are you? And thank you for having me. It's really a great opportunity.
So, Al, I want to thank you for being my guest. Thank you for your service. And we're going to go into that. This is our veteran segment. We've done 66 of these shows since I've been supervisor, and everyone has a veteran. It's just another way in which we're trying to show in Clarkstown how important our vets are to us, how important they are to the town. It's our Veterans Breakfast, it's our the Veterans Banners that we do that commemorate vets that have lived here, living and dead. But it's really important, I think, as town supervisor, for us to continue to thank our vets and thank them for their service. And again, you spent a career in the military through the reserves that we're going to learn a little bit more about during wartime and in peacetime that has caused you to offer some great service for our country, and at a time when there wasn't, for the most part, a draft. So it's voluntary, and we're great military, but it's a volunteer military, and so which is even all the more reason that we want to thank people for putting themselves in harm's way and for taking the time to serve. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So Al, let's just talk a little bit. Let's start with your background, your education, your upbringing. Where were you born and raised, and how long have you been living here in Clarkstown?
Born in Manhattan originally, then moved to the Bronx, and spent a little bit of time in the Bronx growing up and my teenage years near the Bronx Zoo, and then went to Salesian High School, and then on to Pace University, and then from there into my civilian career.
And what did you do in your civilian career?
Civilian career, I started off in pharmaceuticals, and then eventually ending up into medical equipment in the medical gas systems in the hospitals, and actually building hospitals
right.
as part of my thing. And then later on in life, into bulk storage of the big container ships coming in with all the seafood from all over the world. So that was in the last part of my life.
So you've had a pretty broad career.
A broad career. Yeah. And then as far as military is concerned,
so let's start in the beginning with that, because you started in the Vietnam era and you finished, you went all the way through Desert Storm, correct?
Yeah. Well,
so
actually, when I was in college, I received my draft notice, and I was in a very hot draft board area in Flushing, New York, and they sent me a draft notice, and they said, geez, you're in, here's your token. So I went back to the draft board and I said, I'm in college right now. They said, well, the day you get out of college, we are going to own you. So I managed to get my name on a waiting list over at Fort Taunton, and it took almost a year for me to get into the reserves, and that's how I managed to start with the Army Reserves.
So that was roughly 1968?
68.
And you started as a cook with the reserves?
They said, poof, you're a cook. And I started off as a cook, and I fell into it. And I can remember there was an old-time sergeant who was my boss at the time, and he always said, he says, you always got to stay in. He says, you're going to get a good pension, and they're going to take care of you. And I said, yeah. But as I stayed in, I got more involved and more involved. And then eventually working my way from just a cook to finally I was commissioned in '85 as a chief warrant officer. And ended up in '90 being activated. Even though I was working on a civilian job, I was activated and deployed to Saudi Arabia as part of Desert Storm.
So tell us a little bit about that. There was a big build-up with with Desert Storm, the first President Bush,
The father.
the father, the invasion of Kuwait,
Mhm.
and the oil fields, and it was a very scary time, a fearful time, real rise in patriotism as well. What was that like for you? You're doing at this point, by 1990, you're well over 20 years in your civilian career, and you're well over 20 years in the reserves, right? So
Right.
you're living almost like a dual life.
A dual
right?
life, yes.
So during that 20-year period, as you're kind of moving your way up, before you became a chief warrant officer, what was the commitment to the reserves? I mean, it was weekends,
It was generally weekends, at least one weekend a month, and then 2 weeks in the summer for summer camp. And if they needed any extra duty on the side, we would.
Right.
If I was available, I would volunteer.
Right.
Yeah.
And plus, you're also getting additional training as all of those years. So every year you're there, you started as a cook, but ultimately you're moving your way up. So you're actually getting promoted to chief warrant officer as within that, and it leads now to like this big buildup. Desert Storm.
Yeah.
Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait. They flee. He starts. He takes over the oil fields. The world is turned upside down, and they start to build a coalition, and lots of troops going to go over. But it's really the U.S. troops, and it's hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops and people are now being mobilized. You're being mobilized, and now you're in a supportive role for the combat troops that are eventually going to go in, and you're just a stone's throw away in Saudi Arabia. What was that like for you, being called up to active duty?
At first, it was a little shocking. To the family, it was devastating. But once I realized what my obligation was, I accepted it. And I took it with a grain of salt and marched forward. And it was an awkward time, too, because it was just before Thanksgiving. And 2 weeks later, I find myself in Fort Meade for training, and we deployed for Saudi Arabia on, I think it was Christmas, about 2 or 3 days before Christmas, and we finally landed in Saudi Arabia on Christmas night.
Wow.
Yeah. And because I was food advisor for the brigade, for the 800th MP Brigade, I was in the plane with the general, so we had 2 F-16s on each side, bringing us down into the Khobar airfield. So that's something you never forget.
Right. It absolutely had to be, but you assumed a leadership role too there, right? I mean, so your group, who you were an advisor to, and was responsible for helping to set up and feed up to 80,000 prisoners of war.
Well, we were the goal was to feed to imprison, set up 4 prison camps, and in those camps. The total number of prisoners we were expecting was over 100,000, close to 100,000, with 96,000. So it's like planning a party. Not only do you have to worry about food, you have to worry about bedding, clothing, delousing, the in-process, the medical, sanitation. And it was an incredible experience. I mean, it was an education unto itself for me.
Right.
So
it's just, I mean, imagine that. So 96,000 prisoners of war in 4 camps, plus you had the 8,000 MPs, right?
MPs that it was responsible for. And, it worked, and the total number of prisoners that we ended up with was close to 70,000.
Right.
And they actually prepared their own meals in the encampments that we had, and they we treated them in accordance with the Geneva Convention, and we were scrutinized very closely by the teams, and we made sure that we treated the prisoners with the utmost respect.
And you also received an award for that as well, right?
Yeah, and also during that time, then I went from Khobar, I went over to Riyadh, and then I spent some time in the subcom where Schwarzkopf hung his hat,
Mm-hmm.
and it was actually like the Saudi Pentagon, we would refer to it, and over there I worked, in additional logistical areas, helping, prepare for the invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an incredible experience.
And just, it's amazing if you think about just that, those numbers are astounding. 70,000 prisoners of war and 8,000 MPs, so, and other staff. So, I'll liken that to the old Giant Stadium could hold roughly 80,000 people.
Right.
So it's like you were responsible, and you were one of the logistics guys, coming from your civilian background, and you're at that point 25 years or so, 23 years experience in the military, to make sure that the things that were necessary to take care of enough people to fill in the old Giant Stadium. It's phenomenal, and
Yeah.
And all of the additional training you would have had to have gone for, the security clearances and what have you. Just thank you for that service. It's just remarkable. I understand then you became the food advisor as well for the medical brigade and the combat support hospital, and you later went on to receive an award for that as well, correct?
Yeah. When I returned from Saudi Arabia, I then joined the 8th Medical Brigade, and I spent over 10 years with them. And they had about 20 different units. Some were, DEPMED units that deployed immediately and set up. They could set up a hospital from 20 beds to 500 beds.
Right.
And to see that is an incredible experience.
And again, I think the award that you won was the Philip Connolly Award for the U.S. Army Field Kitchen of the Year in 2000.
Yeah, that was big competition in the
Right.
Army, and that was a challenging award to receive, and I refer to it as similar to the Stanley Cup.
Oh, that's great.
But in the military, it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful story. So, after your service, eventually 2003 comes rolling around, and you
I
retired from the military.
retired from the military. Yes,
And you also receive
I received the Legion of Merit,
Mhm.
and which is one of the highest awards you can get, and in peacetime, and also was recognized by President Bush.
the second President Bush.
Second President Bush, I received a personal letter from him noting my service and everything, and so yes.
That's incredible. And then you've lived in Rockland for well over 50 years with your wife.
Yes, and 42 of those years in Clarkstown.
That's great.
Yeah.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah.
And how many children do you and your wife Paula have?
We have 4. We have Jean Marie, our oldest daughter, and then we have 3 sons, John, Greg, and Brian.
Right. And grandchildren as well.
Grandchildren, we have 5 grandchildren.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Tell us, what's your fondest memory of your military service? Do you have like one thing that just sticks out for you?
Well, it's hard because what I went through in Saudi Arabia was just something that you never forget. And was it good? it was a learning experience, you know, and I was fortunate to glean all that at the time. The military to me wasn't bad at all. It was a good experience. It was a healthy experience. And I still think that, you know, it should be part of every individual's life, maybe before, you know, after high school, and then just before into college. Maybe there's a better appreciation for education then.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
disagree. I think in Israel, folks have mandatory,
Commitment.
you know, experience in the military,
Yeah.
and I think I've spoken with loads of folks that have done it and over there, and it gives them a different appreciation, and I think it also helps as a motivating factor for them as they go on with their civilian life as well.
Right.
So it's probably something that makes a bit of sense. Well, Al, I want to thank you for being a great guest. I want to thank you for your service. You know, over 33 years in the military, and you know, your service in both peacetime and in wartime, and really unheralded type of service. I mean, logistical support and MPs, you know, and you know, taking care of combatants against the country. That's not something that a lot of people would really, you know, be happy looking to do. But not only did you do it, you did it well, and you did it with dignity, and you were able to really bring a high degree of professionalism to it. You know, recognized by all the awards that you received throughout your career, not just there, but also with the medical brigade later on. So thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.